Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Once again, we're filming remotely, which is not an unusual practice on everybody being virtual today. And we've tried to focus on the COVID-19 issues. And today will be much of the same. We're going to try and talk a little bit about how the board's role might vary in the COVID-19 crisis. And joining me is somebody who's very experienced in anything related to risk or governance or compliance. Please welcome Shellye Archambeau, who's a board member with Verizon Communications, Okta, Inc., Roper Technologies, and Nordstrom. Welcome, Shellye.
Well, thank you, TK. It's great to join you again.
Yes, we had you on before. We tapped that GRC specialty. You and I had a nice chat about risk management. It was very well received. And before we dive into today's questions connected with the coronavirus, I saw recently that you released a new book that you've written called Unapologetically Ambitious: Take Risks, Break Barriers, and Create Success on Your Own Terms. And knowing you, I know that you had to conquer some major hurdles in your career, particularly in Silicon Valley, being a minority woman. But just take a minute or two and talk about what the book's about and why it would be interesting for a board member to read.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much for asking, TK. I'm pretty excited about it. You know, the book, Unapologetically Ambitious, is full of strategies, approaches, and techniques to really help professionals achieve their aspirations, both professionally and personally. Because one of the things I've absolutely learned is ambition alone isn't enough. And so I share through my experiences the power of being intentional, the power of setting goals and creating plans to achieve those goals. Because what I've learned is, well, a lot of people set goals. Some people try to put a plan in place to achieve the goals, but very few people actually make decisions every day consistent with their plans. And that's where the power lies, and hence intentional. So when you ask about, how would this apply to board members, for many people, sitting on a board seat is indeed one of their goals professionally. But when they get there, it's still important to set goals and figure out what are you trying to achieve, contribute, learn, and or grow from. So be intentional about that. Do you want to actually rise to board leadership? Are you trying to enhance and develop a certain skill or specialty with regards to the board? Are there things that you personally want to gain and or contribute to the organization itself? So being intentional is something that, as far as I'm concerned, never ends. And there is value to it all the way through your career. So I think board members would find something valuable from it as well.
So I view you as a great role model, and
Thank you.
That in its own right, I think it would be interesting that what people could garner from that. But if someone's interested, where can they get a copy?
Actually, right now it's available for pre-order on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. You can even, I don't think right now a lot of bookstores are closed, but online for sure. You can get your pre-orders in, which I would appreciate.
Well, again, I wish you luck with that, and I'm sure it'll be an interesting read. I can't wait to read it myself. So on to COVID-19. So Shellye, no surprise in the sense that boards have gone through what I will call an unprecedented experience with the crisis. I mean, nobody, even the best risk black swan predictors, would have had a hard time predicting all of the nuances that we've gone through with the crisis. So here we are, all learning together, using logic and crisis processes to adapt to whatever our new normal is. So my first question for you is, how do you decide how much you as a director and as a board get involved in the process when the crisis hit? I know you sit on multiple boards. I know your boards are probably different. And I don't want you to speak to any specific board, but how did you wait to management to invite you in at a deeper level? How has it played out for you, and what advice would you give to less experienced directors? Sort of, what are the cues to get sort of more involved in something like this?
Mm. Frankly, for all of my boards, it's really been, it almost feels joint. So as all this was happening, we were reaching out and the companies themselves were reaching out. And frankly, in the beginning, in March, oh my goodness. I mean, it wasn't just, calls every week. For some companies, I was on a board related call, multiple times during the week. So with 4 boards, it was extremely active because as you said, this really hasn't been experienced before. So there's no playbook, right? There's no handbook. There's no one that you go to say, hey, how did you handle this? So therefore, one of the big roles that board members play is providing advice, counsel, perspective. And so companies leaned on that heavily to share, all right, here's what we've done, here's what we're thinking, what are we missing? What else should we be considering? What are you seeing at other companies? Right? How do we learn from everyone as we're moving forward? So the advice and counsel piece was very active. And frankly, the good news is for all of my boards, the CEOs and management very much see the board as an extension with regards to being able to get that kind of input and feedback. So I would say it was definitely mutual. And with regards to now, it's evolved. So it went from happening almost in a reactive sense to proactive once a week calls to now most of my boards it's biweekly. So it's still active because we're not through this. And it's a combination of first you need to deal with the crisis. And most companies have now, when I say dealt with the crisis, I don't mean the crisis is over, but we've got plans in place, we've got actions, things are happening. So now it's about the future, looking at here's the strategy we had in place. Is the strategy still valid? What has changed? What do we need to do with regards to tweaking or shaping? And then, okay, how do we make sure that the decisions we're making now through this period actually help further the overall strategy execution that we've got? Because one of the things, and I think Tom Friedman talks about it often, is any trends that are happening before the crisis tend to get accelerated during a crisis. And we're seeing it. Online shopping activity, right, has just escalated. Delivery activity has escalated. Online learning has escalated. All these trends that were starting to happen. So we've got to make sure that the strategies we have as companies are reflecting the fact that all of this is being sped up. So what do we need to actually speed up? And what decisions can we make now in concert with dealing with what we're facing, but also position us as well as possible for the future. So all of that strategy piece is important, but underlying all of it is the safety of stakeholders, the safety of our employees, the safety of our customers, right? The safety of our suppliers.
So there's no question that we're, sort of in a new normal at this point. In the beginning, we were just reacting, like you said. Now we have to plan. And as you said, some people have really realized that maybe I don't need these offices. Maybe I don't, more people can work remotely, and what's interesting about your situation is you have different types of industries. You have retail, you have, companies that probably are technology based, maybe don't need to be in. So I would imagine those are all challenges for you. And that's what I want to ask you as your last question. This issue of returning to work, where you were reactionary when the crisis hit, now you're sitting there, okay, and you're looking at employee safety, customer safety, what do we do with office configurations? Do we bring people back? When do we bring them back? And it's almost too much time, okay? Because you really don't know what the future is. So it puts you in a very, very interesting situation, and the issues seem to be endless. So talk just a little bit about the board's role in those kind of discussions when you're talking about, quote, the new normal or returning to work.
Certainly. But if you don't mind, TK, I'm going to tweak the question a bit because when you talk about returning to work, people have been working through this whole period. It's really return to an office, right, or to a physical building. Many people, whether they're essential workers, right, et cetera, have been not only working, but working outside and interacting with people, not just at home. So the real question of what companies are trying to balance is to be able to execute and deliver on the strategy that we have in place. Where do people need to work? And how do we provide the right space now with our new learnings? Back to my point on accelerated trends, work from home, work remote, that was a trend that was happening. But now companies have actually experienced and frankly learned quite a bit. There are a number of roles that they thought could never work remote that they realize now, oh, they can. And then others, they realize, no, we really do need people together to be able to get. So this has been a fantastic learning from that perspective. But what I would tell you is the way my companies are looking at this is setting a set of principles. So, what are the principles by which we are going to decide not only where people work, but when they come back to a physical office? And then communicating those out to employees so employees understand here's how we're thinking about it, and everybody's part of that overall process. So, principles, obviously, employee safety. So employee safety is not just where do we stand in terms of external on COVID, but can we configure our offices properly to enable social distancing? Do we have access to enough PPE equipment for people to wear? Can we ensure that entrance and exits from buildings are safe? It's very different if you've got a building that is your own and maybe one or two stories versus if you've got offices that are on the 64th floor of an office tower, because actually moving up and down those elevators, it's going to impact. So you have to look at each of those differently. And then once you've decided that you've got that safety piece, now, is it legal? What are the different rules and regulations in the different locations in which you have offices and or buildings? That so you look at a whole series of things. And then what's happening externally in the area in which you're looking to bring people back? Are the numbers declining? Are they increasing? Right. So there's just so many things. But the key is for each company to establish here's a set of principles by which we're going to make the decision about whether or not people come into the office. And that then helps people understand, is it a phased approach or not? Is it starting in September or is it starting next year? I mean, companies are in a very different position. And some, frankly, and I'm not speaking to my own companies, but for some companies, they're saying not at all. You know what? As employees, you decide where you want to work, and then we'll figure out how we accommodate that. So it's really across the board, which is why each company has to establish their own. But my biggest advice for boards is make sure that you understand what the principles are that your company is using and that that is actually being communicated broadly, because it will help people develop a set of confidence, frankly, and comfort as they go back to the office.
Great advice, Shellye, and certainly from someone who has some bona fide experience to pass that advice along. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. Obviously, we'll have to see how all this story ends.
For sure.
Because we're still adapting, but I wanted to certainly thank you for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you, TK.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.